right, welcome back, fellow jazz bums. Today, I want to discuss Riverside Records and Orpheum Productions. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And then also come and hang out with us on the Jazz Bums Discord. We'll link that in the description below. And then also we live stream every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. So come and check us out there as well. So Riverside Records and Orpheum Productions. To kind of provide context, I wanted to go through the upfront history of Riverside and what led up to the Orpheum sale. So Riverside Records was founded in 1953 by Bill Grauer and Orrin Keepnews. And what they initially did was reissue older titles like Bix Beiderbecke, Jelly Roll Morton, and the like. That's where they started. And I think in the mid-50s is really when they started recording artists. So this was really important in terms of their influence within the jazz genre. They recorded artists like Thelonious Monk, Jimmy Heath, Wes Montgomery, and many others. So their impact is great, and their records are very desirable. So I love collecting Riverside records, but I wanted to discuss the pressings themselves. And I have a stack here that I do want to get through, and you'll see that there's quite a bit, but I think it'll be fun to go through these to kind of look at the label and discuss the pressing qualities and nuances that are really unique to Riverside. So I think I wanted to begin with this first one here. So this is Randy Weston. This is the earliest one that I have, and this is a trio from the mid-50s. And why I wanted to show this was this, when they started pressing 12 inches and also on some 10 inches, the first Riverside label was this white one. And this may look very familiar. These are the more desirable records to get, like especially for Thelonious Monk, because these are kind of the first pressings in many cases, at least for the mono recordings. So these can be pretty pricey. I believe this is the only one in my collection. And they also are the ones that, if you pick up kind of the old OJCs, many of those use the white label as kind of a throwback to the first label that Riverside used. However, many of these records actually were originally pressed using later labels that we're going to take a look at. But the white label is kind of iconic in that sense. In terms of sound quality, that is a product of its day. I did want to get into this a little bit, and I am by no means an expert. I do have a lot of Riverside records. I generally don't double up. So in terms of A-Bing, I don't have many that I have done that with, although I do have some. But the level of inconsistency within their recording and their pressing is noted. I also wanted to mention that a huge resource for a lot of this information that I was able to go through was from London Jazz Collector. And then also there's a lot of great discussion on the Hoffman forums around Riverside pressings. So those two sources really kind of helped me as I was, trying to figure out how to navigate the Riverside catalog. So the thing I wanted to mention is, let me share my screen and I'll show an example. This is a pressing. This is Thelonious Monk Brilliant Corners Mono. I'll get into the label in a little bit when I show some versions of it that I have. But what I wanted to note here in terms of pressing variety is that Riverside pressed locally. So for their distribution on the West Coast, they pressed that Research Craft, and on the East Coast, they pressed that Abbey. And what's notable is if you actually look at the dead wax here shows that there's different banding. So obviously the Abbey one is using more of that 12-inch side and less dead wax. So that indicates that they were both mastered separately and cut separately. So just on this one example alone, it's the same year, it's the same label, but the pressing plant actually did a piece of the mastering, which actually changed a little bit of the sonics because they were just done separately. Additionally, there are different pressing plants. As we know, when we look at early Blue Notes from the mid to late 50s, a lot, if not all of those, were pressed at Plastylite. They were also recorded at Rudy Van Gelder's in Hackensack and later Englewood Cliffs. So there's a tremendous amount of consistency in terms of how things were recorded and presented and mastered. So I think with Riverside, the the whole thing is different. So they recorded in all different studios. They pressed at all different plants, and they used different mastering. And I believe because of all this, they use different vinyl formulations, which have different noise floors. So um, I'm not an expert in this, but this is what I've gathered from collecting and kind of just being, a listener of Riverside. I do want to ask, though, for people who are more knowledgeable about this and have other insights, please drop a comment. What I'm saying is what I've kind of gathered, but if there's anything incorrect about kind of my assessment here, please let me know. I do want to use this, like I do all these kind of videos around pressings, as like a data point and a conversation starter for people who are researching to kind of figure out, what they want to do and get a little bit more information to make them better informed record buyers. Okay, so that is kind of the inconsistency that does reflect in some of the sound quality. So some things sound excellent. We were talking about this topic in the Friday live stream 2 Fridays ago, and people in the comments were saying, I have an original Waltz for Debbie. It sounds fantastic. We've also had Chad Cassim on the live stream before, and he was saying that when he was A-Bing the best against what he was trying to produce for Analog Productions, he included the OJC and thought the OJC was really a top pressing from the 80s, and that was one to beat. So I think there's a lot of variety in the different pressings. So I still think they're fun to have, and the music is exceptional. So let's keep moving on. I want to talk about some other labels. So this is one of my favorites. This is Jimmy Heath's Sextet. I mean, the lineup is incredible on this. Nat Adderley, Curtis Fuller, Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, and Albert Heath on this one. And what this one does is use what the next label is. So it's a blue label. And this, you'll see, I don't know if you'll be able to contrast it, but this is actually a smaller label than the previous one. This is 92 millimeters. And the belief is if you actually look in the dead wax, do you see that little like raised piece there? And the thinking is that they did that and included that for record changers. So when the records were pressed like that at whatever plants included that, they actually used smaller labels, 92 millimeters, which are kind of neat. And this one also has a deep groove. When you do look at the labels, you'll see like some are smaller, some are larger, some have deep grooves, some don't, some have inner little circle divots that are also included. So there's a huge variety, I think, given the pressing plants, and then also within pressing plants, there can be a large variety. As we know, like sometimes Blue Note has a deep groove on one side and not the other. So, it's just challenging to find consistency within Riverside. But this is a 92 millimeter label. The next one is the 100 millimeter label. So this is Blue Mitchell, A Sure Thing. This is a great lineup. This is a little bigger group. I think it's bigger than a No Net, but yeah, this is really cool. And they do A Sure Thing by Jerome Kern. They do some Wes Montgomery stuff on here. So this one is one definitely to check out. So the label here is Deep Groove, but this is the 100 millimeter. So you'll see that this is a little wider, and it is Deep Groove. And yeah, so that's an example of some early mono. So the mono also is blue. I forgot to mention there's distinctions between mono and stereo within the labels. So the next one I'll show you is a stereo, and the stereos were the same thing. They had the 92 millimeter for the small one with the raised edge for the record changers. And that's not totally confirmed that that's the reason why they use that. That's just what people believe to be the case in terms of why they use the smaller label. And then the one I'll show you is a great title by Bobby Timmons, and this has Art Blakey on it, Blue Mitchell, and Sam Jones. So this is kind of cool because a lot of Bobby Timmons stuff on Riverside is trio. So this you also get Blue Mitchell on there, his trumpet. So this is a really nice quartet. And Art Blakey's, I've mentioned this on the live stream before, but he sounds softer on this. Like it just shows the range that he had and how he was able to adapt to whatever group that he was a part of, rather than just always like the thunder drumming that he's really known for with the Jazz Messengers. So yeah, so this is a great title, one to check out. And this is a beautiful deep groove. And you can see how like the center has that small one, but this is, so stereo had the black label. And what I also wanted to show, and I should have even mentioned this in the upfront, is that outside of Riverside, Bill Grauer also had Jazzland as an imprint. And this was like a subsidiary. And I guess the idea is that he was looking to put, maybe some titles he didn't feel rose to the Riverside level, or these were, additional tracks that they had that they didn't put out on other titles. He also used it to reissue some titles in maybe a budget way. There's actually some really, I mean, Jazzland is a fantastic label. There's most of the catalog is worth checking out, but there are some serious gems in there. One of the more famous ones is the Thelonious Monk John Coltrane. That's been reissued by Vinyl Me Please, so a lot of you guys probably have that or are aware of that. But I just wanted to show a couple of those labels as well, because when Riverside transitioned to Orpheum, they also included Jazzland labels, titles. So I think it's worth actually including them in this conversation. This is a great one. This is a really raw hard bop sound. Julian Priester, who's a trombone player. This is Spiritsville on Jazzland. You have Walter Benton on tenor sax, who's a great tenor sax player. McCoy Tyner, Art Taylor, Sam Jones, and Charlie Davis on baritone sax. So this is a really cool one. But I wanted to show that the Jazzland mono label is the small 92 millimeter deep groove with the raised piece there. I don't know if you can see it. You have the regular mono. So this is an example from Benny Green gliding along. So another trombone player. And that is the regular 100 millimeter with the deep groove. And on one side of it, you can see it has like a small little divot in the center. These sound cool. These are really good. And then just an example of a stereo. So this is a Paul Gonsalves record. And you have Nat and Kelly, Sam Jones, and Jimmy Cobb on this one. And the stereo similar is black with the deep groove. Again, they don't necessarily all have the deep groove. These are just some of the examples that I pulled. So that leads us up until Bill Grauer dies abruptly in 1963. And he was really kind of the financial backer of Riverside. So they went to have a sale. And this is where Orpheum Productions kind of steps in. And I did want to show some examples of those, but I do, actually, before I do that, there were a couple that I want to show that I love, but really are not good sounding original pressings. So I just wanted to show that as an example, because I feel like it leads into why I am excited to talk about Orpheum, because I do feel like the quality of Orpheum is there. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So this title by Sam Jones is killer. Sam plays cello and bass on this, and he's right up front. The rhythm section behind him is really buried. I think, it was probably just how it was recorded. And I have the mono of this as well, and it's not that great either. But this is an example of a title that, it's hard to get. It's a little pricey. The music's fantastic, but the pressing itself on Riverside original is not that great. So that's the black Riverside, no deep groove on this one. This one I recently got. This is a pretty hard one to get. Apparently, the stereo copy in particular is really rare. At least according to Discogs, there are very few people that have it. I forget the number now, but it was like 12 people have it, and it came up for a reasonable price, so I picked it up. This one again, her vocals sound good, but the rhythm section behind her really buried. So this is an example of something that I love, and I would love it to sound great. And this is an original pressing. This is 92 millimeter stereo, and it's underwhelming in terms of the sonics of these. And then I did want to show one that does sound pretty good. So I have an original Chet Baker Sings, and then I also have, this is the mono version, and then I also have the mono Record Store Day version that came out a few years ago. And I did an A/B test on these to see, like, well, maybe if they got the audiophile treatment, maybe that would change everything. And I would say that these are near identical. The original does sound a little better. I think his voice is a little more present, but it's in terms of like the difference and the cost of the original, the mono Record Store Day craft version will get you there. They do a really great job here. But again, this is one that does sound good, but even then it's not recorded extremely well. So, at least that's my opinion. If you guys have any differences or know really great Riverside recordings, please give me some shout outs, because I think that is important. They do have really good recordings as well, but it's just so varied. Okay, now let's get into Orpheum. So essentially, what happened is they needed to kind of liquidate. They just financially couldn't keep afloat. Orrin Keep News, he I think helped to steward things on until he started a new label in 1966. I believe it's 66, Milestone. And what's great about Milestone is that he brings a lot of his players or players that he worked with on Riverside over to Milestone. So there's a really nice progression to the late 60s through Milestone. There's great Nat Adderley stuff. There's Joe Henderson, and a lot more. That's great. McCoy Tyner has a number of great titles on Milestone. And then I think in 1972, that's when Orrin Keep News sold Milestone to Fantasy. And then Fantasy also hired Keep News to come on and kind of run their jazz catalog. I think he did a lot of the old reissues for Fantasy. So that's kind of how his story progressed. But in the interim, before the sale to Orpheum, there is kind of a weird label that I just wanted to point out. And that is this kind of bland label. And the reason why I mention this, and the reason why I think it's worthy of talking about Orpheum and this label, is because apparently I don't have any copies of this with this label, but apparently they sound really good according to people who have them. And I feel like when these come up on eBay or Discogs, people see that it's not the traditional Riverside label. They don't really know what it is, and they kind of ignore it. And a lot can sound good, and they are affordable because of that, because the label is less desirable. I don't know too much about this label specifically, but I think it was an interim period where they didn't want to manufacture new labels when they knew the sale was going to occur. So they kind of just have this kind of standard stock one. And I think that it was only put on a handful of titles. So it's kind of rare. I actually think it's like 6 titles. It could be more than that. And then after this is when we get into the Orpheum. So what's important about Orpheum is they didn't just use the metalwork. So from the research that I've done, the Orpheum pressings, that I'll show you a few here, they actually remastered them. So the dead wax is different than the originals. And from my experience, just from upfront, the 6 examples I'm going to show here are all very good. They all sound good, and the wax is quiet. So I think for the affordability factor and the sonic quality, I think it's important to know that these are records that are not like weird, later pressings that people should ignore, but actually, if you see them for good prices, they're worth grabbing because they sound excellent. So with that, I'm going to show 3 Riversides and 3 Jazzland, I think. So this first one here is Full House, West Montgomery. This is a killer session. This is the mono version of it. And Kraft just reissued this on a 3 LP set, which I believe is still available. And it's definitely worth checking out. You have Johnny Griffin on this, Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb with West Montgomery. It's a live session. It's really good. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite on Riverside. So this is a mono version. Now, original monos of this are incredibly expensive. So this one I think I got for $20. And this is the label. So it's a teal or aqua label. And yeah, I mean, a lot of these are, you find them and they're really clean, and they sound great. So this is what the Orpheum mono label looks like. So that's one example. Another example of a title that has really skyrocketed in price over the past like 2 years. And it's this here is Bobby Timmons. I actually purchased this from someone on the Discord, Chris Gill. So thank you, Chris. And there's also a mono. So mono, and it's the same label, clean. And then the last example, this just came in. I got this for $18. This is 5 by Monk by 5. And this is a stereo version. So we'll see what the stereo label looks like in a second. But Chad Analog Productions just put this out in a box form as well as individually. So that's also a way to get it, and I'm sure it sounds great. But this for $18. And this is what the stereo looks like. So they have the teal for mono, black for stereo. It's a pretty, hard rule, but also there is some variation apparently. So it's not always the fact that, black is stereo. So you want to look at the label to make sure that it says that. So here you could also see it says stereophonic at the top. And then also for Jazzland. So this is a very desirable for Jordan on Jazzland. This is a pretty hard one to get. And this came up, I think it was like $40 or something like this a couple years ago. So I grabbed it. It's in really nice. I think it came in shrink. And the Jazzland Orpheum stereo is this label here. So it's like red. This is what, I mentioned that Jazzland puts out some cool stuff. So this is Shadow Waltz by Sonny Rollins. And what this is I think it's Freedom Suite is the title. And that was only issued in mono on Riverside as a white cover. And this is the first stereo pressing on Jazzland. And so there is a stereo version available. It has a different cover with a different title, but this is the same title. So that's kind of a cool hidden thing within Jazzland. I think there are a few other things like that on Jazzland. So it's worth just checking out what the titles are. And this one, again, is stereo. So it comes on that red label. And I believe this is the last one I wanted to show. So this is another cool one. So this is Blue Mitchell Sextet. This is originally a Riverside pressing. So this one has a similar cover to the Riverside, but the Riverside prices are crazy on this. And this is a stereo version on Jazzland. So that is pretty cool. And again, it's on the red label. I thought I pulled a mono Jazzland, but the mono ones are similar. They also have the 92 and the 100 millimeter, and they're orange. So the monos are orange and the stereos are red. So that's all I wanted to cover. And I think Orpheum is definitely worthy of looking into and finding really good deals on great hard bop titles. The last thing I wanted to do was just take a look and see what's available on Discogs. So I narrowed this down to Orpheum Productions. I removed a bunch of names just to kind of cull the list a little bit. But you can see I just have what's VG Plus in here. And there are 124 available in the United States that are VG Plus. So you have a bunch of Jazzland, you have Lockjaw Davis and Johnny Griffin. There's this Shadow Waltz here, $15 VG Plus condition. So these are really fair prices. There's a Philippines Drums Around the World, $17 Orpheum. What else? You have Monk Mysterioso. There's this Johnny Griffin Little Giant is really expensive on Riverside. This was reissued on Jazzland and then reissued again on Orpheum. So this is $20 for a VG Plus copy of this title. That goes for $150, $200 record probably. Benny Golson. So there's a lot of good affordable stuff. We didn't even hit $25 yet. You have Red Garland, Junior Mance, Wes Montgomery, Charlie Rouse. This is a good one. So it's worth checking out. There's a lot of good deals. There are some that are more expensive if I sorted by, most expensive first, but there are a lot of good deals within the sub $25 range that we just saw. So anyway, I wanted to just touch on this. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sure I missed a bunch of stuff, so please, fill in the gaps. I think I wanted to also show I forget exactly. I did want to show the mono Orpheum Jazzland, so apologies on that. But everything else, I think I tried to touch on. So please like, subscribe, share this. Drop your comments. Do you have Orpheum pressings, and what do you think about them? All right. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next time.